In the West, we were taught that the power of money lies in its high value. Strong nations were said to have strong currencies, while weak nations were left with worthless pieces of paper. Yet, deep in the East, a silent revolution unfolded that turned this logic upside down. Some economists argue that a weak currency can, in fact, be the sharpest sword used to build global hegemony. Today, we're deciphering how China, for decades, has quietly held the world hostage by using money not as a measure of value, but as leverage. This is not the story of a collapse, but of a deliberate devaluation strategy, and of a vast industrial empire built upon it. The story begins in the late 1970s with a poor China emerging from the wreckage of Mao's Cultural Revolution, its industry outdated and exhausted. When Deng Xiaoping stepped onto the stage in 1978, he shattered one of socialism's deepest taboos by declaring that to get rich is patriotic. Beijing's objective was simple: industrialize at the speed of light. But starting the race so far behind, what could you possibly sell to the world? The answer was to make everything unbelievably cheap, and the fastest way to do that ran straight through the exchange rate. Instead of allowing the free market to raise the value of its currency, the Chinese central bank deliberately kept the yuan weak against the dollar. Under normal circumstances, when a country breaks export records, its currency appreciates. But China disrupted this natural balance by constantly absorbing incoming dollars and selling yuan in return. By 2014, these interventions had pushed China's foreign exchange reserves to an astonishing level of nearly $4 trillion. China was selling itself cheaply in order to conquer the world. Just as a shoe giant might intentionally sell a product worth $50 for $10 to wipe competitors off the market, China subjected all its global rivals to an industrial genocide through its currency. Cheapness is not a gift. More often, it is the advance purchase of your future. China understood this reality before anyone else did. By the early 2000s, the effects of this strategy were no longer deniable. China had transformed from a closed agrarian society into the factory of the world. While Western consumers lived inside a false illusion of abundance, cheap televisions, cheap clothing, cheap iPhones, the real winner was Beijing, quietly accumulating power. Even more striking was the fact that China began investing the massive dollars it earned from exports into U.S. Treasury bonds, effectively financing America's debt. The irony grows sharper. American consumers enjoyed cheap products, while in reality, they were buying Chinese goods with money borrowed from China itself. This was a vast cycle of consumption and debt, tightening China's grip in the background. While a strong dollar was seen in the West as a badge of honor, a weak yuan was a geopolitical weapon in China. Beijing sacrificed prestige and gained the essence of industrial power. As Western leaders celebrated consumer choice, Beijing was executing a centuries-long strategy. But this strategy would not remain without enemies. By the time Washington began accusing Beijing of currency manipulation, it was already too late. China had become the undisputed master of global supply chains. So at this point, who do you think was really winning? The consumer? History shows us that Rome tried to expand its empire by diluting its currency, Spain by flooding Europe with silver, and China by devaluing the yuan to build its modern empire. Different tools, but the same ancient game. Yet no matter how brilliant a strategy may be, it always carries the seeds of its own destruction. China's massive machine built on cheapness is now evolving into a new and darker phase. Having trapped the world in an industrial web through its weak currency strategy, China now faces the greatest trap created by its own success, an era in which everything has become too cheap to survive. Starting in 2005, Beijing began allowing the yuan to appreciate gradually because it no longer needed cheapness. It already had factories, infrastructure, logistics, and a trained workforce. It had climbed the ladder and could now kick it away. But the old game plan did not disappear. It merely migrated into industrial sectors. Some economists argue that China has now entered a phase of weaponized productivity. From steel to solar panels, from lithium batteries to electric vehicles, Beijing is bombarding global markets with products. This is not trade designed purely to make a profit. It is a strategic pursuit of monopoly, engineered to eliminate competitors. Local governments pour billions of dollars in subsidies into factories, allowing companies to sell products below cost. The goal is to suffocate Western rivals, whose survival depends on shareholder profit expectations, and force them out of the market. Once supply chains become dependent on China, Beijing will gain the power to dictate prices. Yet this colossal production machine has entered a destructive internal loop known as involution, or internal contraction. This is a system in which companies no longer innovate to grow, but produce more at lower margins simply to survive, where efficiency itself devours profit. In 2024, the more than 20% drop in China's industrial profits became the clearest sign of this systemic exhaustion. Empires do not collapse only from external attacks. Sometimes they fall when productivity loses its balance and purpose. Beijing's ultimate ambition is no longer merely to sell goods, but to achieve monetary sovereignty. Through the digital yuan project, it aims to bypass traditional payment systems and gain absolute control over money flows. From oil contracts in the Middle East to the Belt and Road Initiative, everything is part of an effort to position the yuan as a global pillar of trust against the dollar. If this succeeds, Beijing will no longer have to play by Washington's rules. It will write the rules itself. So what awaits us at the end of this vast illusion? The most unshakable law history teaches us is that no system can grow in imbalance forever. When Rome's expansion slowed, it began squeezing its own people. Today, China faces the same test. As the global system becomes more fragile, factories in the West are shutting down under competitive pressure, and the cost of cheapness returns as social stagnation. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us 2,000 years ago, true wealth does not lie in numbers on stock screens or massive production capacity. Real wealth lies in maintaining balance without falling for the system's illusions. The Chinese strategy has proven that money is never neutral. It is always a weapon. A weak currency can lift hundreds of millions out of poverty, but it can also create a global trap of debt and dependency. Where do you position yourself right now? Are you enjoying the comfort of cheap abundance? Or can you see that this abundance is, in fact, a debt stolen from your future? Remember, the system promises you comfort and low prices. Protecting your freedom and real wealth is only possible by understanding these deep historical mechanisms. On Finance Through Time, we will continue to decipher the hidden architecture of money, because history holds the answers, and we are only showing you where to look. If this journey has given you a new perspective, subscribe, because the real story is just beginning.